and I'll just add people as they come in. Okay. So let me get this away. Here we go. And I don't need all these stuff. And let me get my Photoshop. So we'll come back to that. The one thing I can just say right away, since I'm on this page, this is for everyone. You see how Smashy has, it's going to be floating. And he's floating down here. And this is really good, Splashy. Over here, all you have to do is now get that to be the same over here, right? But what you could use, and this is what you can do, is you could use the canvas. Remember, image converts the actual document to a different resolution. Canvas only changes the paper size, doesn't affect the resolution or anything, just the paper size. So what I would recommend is go to Canvas, and as I can see here, you need more space above. So what you're going to do is you're going to you click down here so that when you add height, let me go to inches, height, and look how big you are. You're only 5 inches by 3 inches. You can now add height, and you can make this height, let's make this a 5, and that'll give you a square, which is fine, a nice thumbnail. And you see now you have more height. And you can begin to actually link this. Remember, you can link it, or you can do Shift key. Shift key does the same as linking. The linking just locks it in there. And now I can move this up. You see, so now I'm really floating. So I have an equal amount down here as an equal amount up there. And then as you can see, you can delete what you need in regards to the bottom and the top. But now it's floating nicely, which is a nice icon. A square is an icon, avatar, as they say.
Professor, quick question.
Yes.
One of my struggles with the lion face is that it's a straight line across the top. There's no addition. You see, like the
right,
side?
right.
How do I approach that?
So the best way to do that is, number one, clean up the edges here, and then. This is a little bit what we did with Rebecca's. Remember what we showed this morning, the patch tool, right? So you want to come up here and get a little bit more of like this. Remember, content aware was here before. I've got linked on, I don't want link. There we go. You see? And now I have a little bit more.
All right.
So play with that.
All right. What tool was that? What tool was that again? Sorry.
That was right under here, the patch tool.
Patch tool. All right.
So what you do, the patch tool, is you select what you want to change. Then this pulls in. Let me do it over here. So in other words, if I want the eye to be up here, okay, I would draw the patch tool here. You see?
Oh.
It pulls in the surrounding area.
All right. All right.
Now, we don't want to do that, but I wanted to show you what it actually does.
All right. I'll mess with it. Thank you.
Yeah. And exactly. The other thing too is, remember about your assets. If you find another lion, you could go and get that mane a little bit more on top, and you can get the color of whatever your asset is to be this color. And that's when you work again, as we talked about yesterday, under adjustments, levels, things like photo filter, choosing a color in the reference here, like this. See, like watch when I click this. Like I click this, I come off of the page, I get an eyedropper. And now that eyedropper is here. And now I can apply that color to that particular layer. So that's, what I would do with this one, just looking at it, is I would convert it to black and white because it's closer to black and white. And then I would go in there and try to create some of the sepia tannish tones in here, right? Like the color of the eye is right here. So mess with that, Smashy, but it's coming along nicely.
All right,
Now,
thank
the
you.
thing to remember about this is, which is important, is if Smashy wanted to use this, Splashy, I'm sorry, not Smashy, Splashy wanted to use this, you have to remember these are two assets from someone else's work, right? This is actually a really nice Photoshop image of Marley from a photograph. You really would have to get permission to use it in a commercial context.
Right.
So it's important to know, and you know, they may be fine with that, but, and so what you want to do is you find their portfolio website, the credit of who they are, and then you give them credit for this, and then you get their permission. And if they say, yes, this is great, right, then it's good to go, you could utilize it. So in other words, if you wanted to use this avatar as an avatar for your YouTube channel, you would need to get their permission. And then what they would probably more than likely ask is that every time you put it into your YouTube channel, all your descriptions, you would copy and paste their credit. Photo by, photo, you know, so forth. And they may like that because they're going to get hits, people utilizing it. But everything is about being upfront and transparent. That's what, when someone says open source, it means like, yes, you can use this, but give me credit. Like you did not create that. You created the blend, but you didn't create the individual pictures. And that's what all that is about. And a lot of people are very open to that. Okay, so let's move on to utilizing what we're going to do further in Photoshop. So what's important to know is, you know, all of these are layers. And so again, it's important to try to keep your layers as separate as possible. So now they have brought in, as you can see here, a smart object. They have brought in an image that has ACLU. But if you want to create your own type, the way to do this is this. And I'm also going to go through a little bit of Illustrator. So I'm going to launch that now because I want to show you a very important tool that is in Illustrator that is not in Photoshop. And that is because it is putting type on a curve. So if you want type on a specific curve, a circle, or a Photoshop file, I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm just going to get started here. 1 inches, there we go. Okay. But we'll come back to that in a second after we do the type tool first in Photoshop. So you can really download a lot of fonts today that are open source. A lot of the important fonts you more than likely have to pay for. So when you do a Photoshop work for a client, you can kind of utilize fonts. And one of my favorite go-to fonts is DaFont. There's lots of them. There's WebKit. So what we're talking about is fonts. And it's important to know, let me see if I can get to this here, that like in DaFonts, right away you can begin to kind of pick and choose what you like. So you can utilize fonts from DaFont, and you could use it as a mock-up, as we say. So in other words, if you find a font that you want the client to utilize through a marketing campaign, say for instance, you can utilize a little bit of a screenshot font, such as this. So if I had ACLU here, I'm sort of just trying things out, it will use that font. And if I enlarge this font, get this as big as I can try to capture this and bring this into Photoshop like this. And so I'm going to save this to show you. And I'm just using this as a mock-up, as we say. And that was sort of, if you looked at that library resource I gave you, Getty Images does that. So I'm just going to get this to my downloads. Always know where your documents are going on your computer. But the point to be made is that you can utilize a lot of fonts, and WebKit is one of them. And interesting enough, I'm not finding what I want. Typekit is the other one. Typekit is Adobe. And you can begin to get your fonts and explore fonts and so forth, and to be able to get them and download them, and they will actually install into your computer. So it's a good thing to try to utilize that while you have the subscription, to get the download of the fonts and so forth. So then if you notice, view family, and it's going to give you a whole slew of the different ones. There are 1 trillion, if not 1 billion, fonts in the world. And people get very particular. And so when you work in web design, as such you will do with Photoshop, most web designers, graphic designers for web content, I'm not talking about print, web content utilizes what we call sans serif. That's a French word, which means sans means without, and serif means curves. So in web design and web content, you're always using a sans serif without curves. So for instance, the one that I just gave you here, this is a serif font right here. So I could go on and on about fonts, but that is best in a course called graphic design or typography. So the important thing that I want to emphasize is that for web is without a curve. So in print, if you're going to do something for print and you know that it's going to go for web, maybe the billboard picture could have the serif font, but any information about that page should, and it's going to be on a web, should be without curves, sans serifs. So that's important as we use the type tool. Now, the other component that I give to you here, and this is what we do as graphic designers. Let me go to my page here. Is that under my font page, under resources, there is a link for Latin. And Latin is utilized as a really good source to be able to put copy. And Latin is basically not information that says anything. You can't make heads or tails of it. But it is utilized as a source for text, right up here, Latin. And so what this does is it gives you a Word document where you basically have this in your source files. You're just going to pick this up. And what this does is it gives you copy enough so that when I am in Photograph and I need to make information on a page, such as something like this, this is what they use. They use Latin. Because we don't know what the writers are doing, but we need something as designers as a placeholder. And so it's very important to, when you're working with graphic designers, they always need that information. So what you're saying to them is, I need you to design a block of information. It's going to be 25 words. And they will give you, when they're finally done, so what you do is you would go to your Word document and you would choose 25 words. And that's what you copy and paste into here. So that when the copy comes, it's going to fit. Point size and everything and so forth. So the important thing, and 12 points is basically for web. That's the generic size in point size. Fonts come in different sizes. 12 is very standard for web, pretty standard for print as well. But the important part as a designer is they are either going to give you less or more. They never give you what they say. So you've got to design with that ballpark, like more or less, and to be able to make those changes. So when we come here using the type tool, and I'm going to do that now. So as soon as you have the type tool and you click this, it automatically comes up with everything that you need to know. So I'm just going to create it by generic, and you can mouse down and make a block of information. Now I'm 12 point here, and I'm just going to copy and paste the font. And as you can see, it's not a color that I can see. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to change that color to black so we can see it. And you notice how I switched up the palette here? So this palette is often used for print, and this palette is primarily used for web. So why is that the case? So I'm going to use black first to get that into my parameter. But the important conversation to have here is that web colors has been chosen as a universal color that anybody who has a computer in the world will see that color. If you choose a color for web like this, it might be a little iffy on accuracy. So where does accuracy fall through the cracks? Things like tan or turquoise or blue, colors that have a great range, as I spoke about before. So you don't really have to worry about these colors if it's very minimal. But if you have a dominant color like this blue, you really want, and you know the marketing campaign is going to be really seen on the web, which it more than likely will be today in 2020, right? Versus 2000. 2000 would be 50-50 print, 50 web. So now we're going much more in web content. So I would really choose a web color, because if dominant was this blue color, I would really utilize that. So that's the important context of why Adobe changes this up for you. And again, this is the color here. Now, for something big like this, obviously I don't have that much copy, but you can see that when I change this, it's going to change the copy so that I could utilize. And of course, you have the paragraphs, and everything is very intuitive about this. Font size and so forth. But things get very particular when you have, and I just click this to show you. You pull this over. This appeared because I clicked this right here. This gives us, and unfortunately it can't get bigger for you. I can't zoom in other words. This gives us all the particulars that are in what we call in graphic design, like the space between the two sentences. So if I, as you see here, if I added this, look what would happen, right? Or here, it changes it up. So the space between the letters, so let's just do a real exaggeration so you can see. right? That I can zoom in on here. So let me do, oops, don't want to do that. So you see on this, again, I'm going to give you a heads up on this because it happens to me all the time. The type tool is what I call a sticky tool. Sticky tool means that you have to be super careful about what you select because it kind of disappears or appears or you can't get to it, all of that above. So what you want to be sure is that you're on the type tool when you select inside. So let me get this. So if I'm trying to do the Z key to zoom or space bar, space is the text. So I have to unselect, do my space bar, then come back into my type tool, and I have it. So that's what I meant by the sticky aspect of it. So now you can see what this is doing, and you have to select the type when you are changing the parameters up here. So now you see here, this will be the point, or this will be the metrics here. And that's not going to give it to me, but on this it will. Do you see it changes? Now, why is this important? It is because there's two reasons why these tools are here. One, for design, to make it look appealing, and number two, to make it more readable. The important part of anything on the web is to make it readable for the important information. If there's information that's sort of blah, 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 you can kind of reduce it and let people find another way to read it. Could be a download PDF, right? That's always the best. If it's technical information, if it's important information. That frustration that I told you today was actually with the app called PayPal. Has anyone ever used PayPal? Yay or nay, right? Rebecca, shake your head, right? Very frustrating. My client wouldn't pay me because their company was set up for payments only through PayPal. So I had to get PayPal and I had to download it, and it was my first experience. I had it like 20 years ago and I wasn't happy with it. So I never went back, and I went back this time because I had to. And sure enough, I was frustrated, but I finally got through the software, and they gave me a lot of information with fonts that look like this, very big, very bold, to get me through the software. So you do have to read what you see. And so important information, you have to be careful. So there's that Z that I just clicked to zoom out. So this is, and so you have all kinds of fonts here to be able to get the font to be what you want. So again, just highlight and sort of play with them. You'll see exactly what they do when you do. So this is auto, and I'll just leave that. And then to come out of it is this. So I'm going to zoom out, get back to Photoshop. Let's do full screen. Not too full, because I want to get it so that you can see it. Okay, so now with that tool, this is where it lets you, I want to show you a little bit of some other things here. Let me zoom out to get a better picture. And so view is very important. Often I just want to see the whole thing. So I go through view a lot to be able to pull out, pull in, and so forth. So I want to just get this text to be the size for ACLU, because this image, this is not a text. Notice the difference on my layers here. The T is the text, and that will tell me that it's not an image, and that means it's editable. So I just want to get this up to UCLA, no, ACUL, not the university. Get this to be big, and now I can just put in here 200 points. And I can get this to be zoomed out like this, and I'm going to make it a color which is going to be sort of white. Let's keep it white. So now here is the importance here And again, you see this up here is the check. It means that you are accepting what your change is, or you can double click, one or the other. But look what happens when I zoom in on here. So the important aspect is you see this. Whoops, oops, let me back up on that. I'm so zoomed in, I don't know what I can't see what I'm doing here. And I am an Illustrator. Sorry, folks, I just jumped to Illustrator. And let me zoom out. Oh, that's because Illustrator is full screen. So I should get rid of that. And where's my Photoshop? There we go. Okay, Photoshop. That's the problem when you have too many programs on one screen. Okay, so you see, happens to the best of us. Don't freak out, just zoom out. What I'm trying to do is zoom in to show you the difference between something that is vector and something that is bitmapped. So you see, this is an image, and this is a vector image, and so it's much smoother, and it has a little bit of a zoom in because of the edges here. So that's the difference. It's still a text tool that it's editable, but it still isn't a bitmap program. And when we go to Illustrator, you'll see a world of a difference on that. And just a heads up, I actually have found there is a big difference on the resolution of type when you bring Illustrator type into Photoshop, which is why we're having this conversation. It's much crisper than if you create the font in Photoshop. So I did a test on that, and I really find that if I'm doing big type or little type, big type is easier in Photoshop, not so bad, but small type definitely better in Illustrator to bring into Photoshop. And Photoshop is ultimately a web format, but you can convert your text in Illustrator to web. So often if you have a web page with a lot of type, you're going to do it in InDesign or you're going to do it in Illustrator, and you're going to bring Photoshop into those two programs. Oh, running out of time. I have 10 more minutes now. So the thing that I want to show you, we'll do Illustrator when we come back because I don't want to jump into Illustrator when I get cut off. The important part here is, so now I have my ACLU, but now look what we can do once we have type. We can add under here, under layer, layer styles, a drop shadow. So the other thing that we'll be doing when we come back is looking at your concept and themes. And that's what I want to take the time to do. So right now, under layer style, you have glows, you have inner glows, outer glows, strokes, and drop shadows. So let me just show you how to use this window for any of these things. Also embedded. So I could do an embedded one, and as you can see, I will get this to be a little bigger on, let me do the emboss first. So you can see you can change the font, and if you don't want the emboss, you can go back to the drop shadow. And so the drop shadow, you see, it's choosing the shadow like that. You can choose what size you want the light to be on. You can also spread it out so it becomes sort of like a glow. Let me get it back a little bit back to, yeah, that's fine. There. Thickness, side, there's the glow and the spread. So you see how I'm playing with it? Now, what's important about being a developer, which is what I am, I'm a designer and a developer, and what does that mean? That means that I create content in software programs. And when you work with software programs, there are a million of these windows that pop up that give you lots of variables. You're never going to remember them. Do not write them down. Capture the screen. So if I like this and I have to apply this to multiple pages, I want to remember what this is. The best way to do this is to capture the screen like this. I'm on a PC, so Snippet is my tool. And I'm going to capture this. I might even include that. And I'm going to save this. Snippet just kind of wigged out on me. I'm going to, oh, here it is. Save this to my production folder for the production that I'm working on, everything I'm doing regarding this. So ACLU drop shadow. And I'm going to save that to my file. And then when I have to go back to utilize that, I haven't lost it. It's part of my assets. I can look at this. So you have these windows all the time. And so, and there are way too many things to write down. So that's a really nice ability to remember to keep your notes. Just like I think Rebecca did this, capturing the screen in Photoshop. Really nice to do that because you can look at all the tools that you use and the variables that they had. So it's important to know because you have to repeat it. So I did this on a voiceover. I corrected some sound and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I got the tools to do what I wanted, finally. So I captured the screen. So the next time when the client sent me the next file, I just applied it. Didn't have to remember it. Didn't have to figure it out where it is. Had that snapshot, had it saved in the production notes. So it's really important to be able to know that you're always going to want to utilize something really cool that you found or that you like again. And you don't, it's hard to remember these things, and notes can get lost. Notes are great to remember things. I take notes all the time. Can't remember what I write. I mean, I can't read my own writing. I'm sorry to say that. I cannot read my own writing. But I know that cognitively, when you take notes with your hand, you do remember. But I'm not going to remember these variables. I do not care to remember these variables. So that's why we capture the screen. So that's a really nice effect for your visual effects.